As I mentioned in our last unit, managers have been worried about motivation for centuries. We've been trying to figure out what makes employees tick. How can we get them to work harder? Well, I'm a psychologist by trade, and I and my colleagues have been working on that problem for a long time. We've come up with a lot of theories to help explain human behavior. Some of them are helpful, and almost all of them are common sense. As you think about your own employees and what motivates them, one theory that may help a little bit is called expectancy theory. Expectancy theory simply argues that people will work hard. They'll put out all right if they think that that effort will yield to performance, and the performance will generate some kind of reward for them. Another theory talks about equity theory. And that theory simply means that people want to be treated fairly. They want to see equity in the environment. They want to get for a certain amount of effort what they see other people getting for a certain amount of effort. Every one of us knows who travels that if you have small kids at home, you never want to leave Texas to go home without bringing home 2 small, red, identical cowboy hats. Of all the theories that exist to understand employee behavior, perhaps the best one, best in the sense that we can understand it and get some mileage out of it, is one of the oldest. That's the theory developed in 1942 by Abe Maslow. Maslow was not a manager. Maslow wasn't writing his theories to help managers understand employee behavior. He was writing for psychologists to get psychologists to understand human behavior. After his theory came out in 1942, a lot of executives saw immediately how they could apply that theory to the workplace. What did Maslow say? It's very simple. All he said was that human beings satisfy their needs in a certain order. And he and I can forecast what that order would be. For example, the most important and fundamental needs that you and I have are the needs to breathe, to eat, to exist. Those are the physiological needs. He constructed this hierarchy to show that we move up that hierarchy one step at a time after one set of needs has been met. So if you're starving, the only thing you're going to be concerned about is food. A commentator years ago, after seeing starvation on the African continent, came back and said that we are all 9 meals away from barbarism. That's Maslow. 9 meals from now, we're right here. But since I hope we all ate lunch and we all had breakfast and we haven't skipped a meal, we're worried about other things. Physiological needs, security needs, and after those needs are met, social needs, ego, and finally, in his theory, self-actualization. That perfect state where all of your needs are met. Don't worry, even if you reach it, you won't stay up there very long. Your bladder will get full. Something will pull you down. If you understand that the theory is dynamic, that it isn't static, that we go up and down and need different things at different times, you can understand a lot about human behavior. Not just the behavior of your employees, but the behavior of your kids, the behavior of your spouse. For example, let me offer you a personal example of Maslow at work. I used to fly airplanes for a living, and when I left the Air Force, I was confronted with a big career decision to make. Would I fly commercially, or would I go on to get my PhD? Well, my thought at the time was, if I flunked out of the PhD program, I could always fly airplanes. I didn't flunk out. 2 years later, I was buried in the library, and I came across a copy of Business Week magazine. On the cover was a picture of a very famous management consultant and professor. It turned out in the article that he was also a senior captain for a major airline. And the article pointed out that this captain would schedule himself during peak periods to fly from San Francisco to New York City, where he would consult. Then he would fly himself from New York to Acapulco, where he would rest. And then he would schedule himself to fly back up to San Francisco, where he was a professor at a well-known university. I saw this, I read about it, and I thought, this person's doing everything that I could possibly want to do. He's flying and he's teaching. He must be self-actualized. I wrote him a letter. Dear Professor so-and-so, how can I grow up to be like you? And he wrote me a very nice letter back saying, you can't get there from here. You can no longer teach at a first-rate university and fly for a first-rate airline. Well, ever since that time, I've often thought that I will never be self-actualized. He's doing everything I could possibly want to do, and so I often daydream about what life would be like if I were he. Imagine that you're this famous pilot professor and you come out to fly your big, enormous, modern aircraft to New York. And everyone is there lined up to do your bidding. The flight attendants are there, the first officer's there, the weatherman is there, and they all say, good morning, good morning, good morning. What would you like, sir? Can you imagine how high you'd be on this hierarchy? And you get into the left seat and you bundle up the aircraft, you get a green light from the tower, and off you go to the runways. When you get the green light, you push 4 throttles forward and 750,000 pounds of aircraft at your touch roll down the runway. After you hit a certain speed, you pull the stick back a little bit like this, and those 750,000 pounds of airplane leap off into the sky. And then you turn the wheel a little bit, and the wing goes down, and you look down over San Francisco, all at your command. And you level off and you're heading east at 33,000 feet. Is there any one of us who wouldn't be self-actualized? Any one of us who wouldn't be having just a great time doing all of this? You'll probably stay self-actualized until you reach the Great Lakes. And all of a sudden, perhaps, your flight engineer says, uh-oh, fire in number 4 engine. Now, that's a critical problem. But once they get the fire out, the airplane can handle very well on 3 engines. But chances are you're no longer thinking about New York, you've got a critical problem, and you're starting to come down the hierarchy a little bit. You're not afraid, you're not worried about your body, and you may even be thinking of how you're going to show the co-pilot, the 40-year-old co-pilot, how the old man flies the airplane. You're still up here. And all of a sudden the flight engineer yells, uh-oh, number 2 engine is on fire and we can't get the fire out. Now you've got a real problem. First of all, it doesn't fly so well on 2 engines, and second of all, it could blow up. Just as you're sinking down the hierarchy of needs, all of a sudden, the flight engineer yells, oh my gosh, number 1 engine just fell off the wing. It doesn't fly on 1 engine. Scene 2, Lake Erie. Swimming to the surface is old Watashi, as the Japanese say, old number 1, who cares nothing about all of these needs except keeping water out of his lungs. What do you see 2 hours later in the lobby of a big hotel in Chicago? After the first successful ditching of a big Boeing something or other, all the passengers are saved. You see the pilot, you see our hero with champagne and flash bulbs, and bam, he's right back up here again. All of us go up and down. Most of us don't end up with flash bulbs and champagne, but we're all right about here somewhere. Now, if you just, again, understand that dynamic, apply the same dynamic to your kids. And it helps you understand why it's so difficult to raise kids today. Again, a personal example. My father came to this country as an immigrant. He was a graduate of a slave labor camp in World War I. He barely survived when he came to America, the golden land, and ended up digging ditches at our local town, learning the language. I don't think you start any lower than this on the hierarchy of needs. And as I describe my father to you, I may be describing your grandfather or your great-grandfather. After a few years, he met my mother, not in the ditch, which was the best thing that ever happened to him. Because then he was able to open up a small gas station and work as a manual laborer, and he raised 3 sons, and after that, 17 years later, a daughter. When you start down here, when any of our parents or grandparents or great-grandparents started down here when they came to countries like America, what did they want? What were their expectations? What motivated them? I know what motivated my father. He just wanted his children to be well. He used to say his sons were his monuments. Step on me, my son, and do better. Well, I did better. When I was 16 years of age, I went to my father and said I wanted to quit school. I wanted to work with him in the gas station. My father looked up at a 16-year-old kid, a kid who was raised on vitamin pills and pediatricians and pasteurized milk. I had already surpassed all of his expectations for his son. I had 12 years of formal education. He didn't have a day. He said, where are the papers? He wanted me to leave school and work with him in the gas station. It was my mother who said, shut up and go back and study at the kitchen table, not my father. It was my mother who ruined my career, not my father. His expectations were met. Now then, you and I have children. We didn't start down here. Most of us are really up here. And yet we go through the same process with our kids, only they get a running head start on us. We say to our kids, step on me and do better. Well, how are they going to do better? Will they have more education than you? Probably not. Will they have a better income than you? Probably not. Hopefully not. We're already up here, and we thrust our children up to a level of need gratification that's hard to maintain. Too many decisions to make. Apply the same problem, the same issue, the same concern to our marriages. Life becomes complex up here. You're dealing with psychological needs, not just good old body needs. In a famous article that was written in a woman's magazine years ago, Maslow has applied to marriage to explain why almost half the marriages in the United States are failing. I looked at that article with my wife because she had picked it out. And the article said, think about your marriage. Think about the people you know who are being divorced. And chances are you no longer see people being divorced for the old usual explanations for divorce like adultery, brutality, and desertion. Now, the article pointed out people are being divorced for more complex needs like she doesn't like you or you don't like her. And the article said marriage is failing today because it's burdened with expectations that husbands and wives should enjoy intellectual companionship, deep romantic love, great sexual pleasure, and those needs are pretty hard to fill all the time. Much higher and more complicated to fill than, say, just good old basic financial needs. So if you think about your kids, if you think about your marriage, Maslow helps explain why you got a problem. What he doesn't explain is, what are you going to do about it? There is a person who helps explain what to do about it, and he relies very heavily on Maslow's hierarchy. Before this session began, you were asked some questions about your job satisfaction. In 1952, a famous psychologist by the name of Frederick Hertzberg also asked 300 accountants and engineers, what do you like about your job? What kinds of things give you job satisfaction, he asked. He got some very interesting answers. The things that turned people on, that gave them a lot of satisfaction and excitement about their work, included achievement, recognition, advancement, responsibility, and the work itself. The things that turned them off included things like pay, boredom, monotony, routine, bad supervisors. Hertzberg looked at their responses and remembered Maslow and realized that the things that turned people on all related to brain needs, that complex bundle of needs at the top of the hierarchy, and the things that tended to turn people off, to demotivate them, related to their physiological or lower level needs, which Maslow, by the way, called belly needs. Based on their responses, he came up with his two-factor theory of job satisfaction. One factor, achievement, recognition, advancement, responsibility, he called motivators. The other factor, he called hygiene factors. He borrowed the term from medicine. I don't know about you, but I had to take a required hygiene course in the 7th grade. It was taught to us by the gym teacher, who didn't know any more hygiene than we did. But he had to read this course, and it took about an hour. And I'll never forget how he hitched up his gym pants and he said, fellas, this is the boys' gym, this is the state required hygiene course, and he started to read. And he said, if you boys don't wash your hands regularly, you are going to get syphilis. We all looked up, ran into the bathroom, washed our hands, and kids were saying, what's syphilis? Nobody knew. 9 years later, as a second lieutenant in the United States Air Force, I saw the movie. And I want you to know we ran in and washed our hands again. Hygiene does not guarantee good health. Hygiene just means you don't pick up a lot of crud. And today, indeed, there is no data that I know of to support an argument that happy, well-paid, well-benefited employees who have lots of hygiene factors taken care of do anything of real value for an organization, except suck up pay and benefits. And yet today, how do we still propose to motivate employees? We give them gold watches. We give them insurance policies. We give them disability insurance. We give them things they can use after work, when they're on vacation, when they're sick, or when they're dead. The big challenge of management is to try to provide the motivators. It's complex, it's difficult, but when you do it, dramatic things can happen.
Customer service. Yes, Mr. Slade. I have your file right here. Thank you for calling back. Now, I checked, and the part was shipped last week. Yes, I understand. Well,
service. Yeah. I told you yesterday that part was shipped.
Get back to me if there are any problems.
Try shipping
Bye-bye,
at
Mr.
211.
Oh, great. The new parts list. Finally. I better double check those new price updates.
Well, what do you know? A new parts list.
What? New prices? I wish those dummies would make up their minds on how much we're charging for this stuff. Think I'll take an early lunch.
Hey, want to go to lunch?
Not right now. Too much to do. I'll try and catch up with you later.
Suit yourself.
I wonder what the special is today.
There's a dramatic difference between those two employees, and they're the same person. And the difference is you. The difference is management and the ability of management to provide that person motivators, things that unleash the motivation that's potentially been there all along. There is one thing that we can provide every employee who works for us: responsibility. And I would argue it motivates you, it motivates me, and it certainly will motivate them. For example, think about the last time you went on vacation. Think of the last time you were out of the shop for a few days. And now it's perhaps Monday morning and you're going back to work. I bet most of the managers and supervisors watching this tape would be motivated on that day they go back to work. We're all in our bathrooms putting on makeup, shaving, combing our hair, and you're looking in the mirror and I bet you're thinking, boy, I've got meetings, I've got mail, I've got lots of things to do. You're alive and you're energized. I have 50 people who work for me, and I suspect many of you have hundreds of people who work for you. We have hundreds of people in hundreds of bathrooms on the same Monday morning getting ready to go to work. They're putting on makeup, they're shaving, they're combing their hair. Only chances are they're saying something like, oh, it's Monday. Or worse, she's coming back today. Are you so much more moral than they are? Or do we have something motivating us that doesn't often motivate them? We're the boss. We've got responsibility. That's something that we can spread around to everyone who works for us. Let's take some time now to examine your job satisfaction and the kinds of things that might turn you on and would also turn on and motivate the people who work for you.